Like when you ask about Easter eggs or like anime reference, did you watch the second season of Invincible?
Yeah.
So 207, the episode where Anissa shows up
Okay.
and Mark like fights her on the beach.
Yep.
One of my board artists, Warren, he boarded that fight scene, and I was like, oh, that fight was sick. Like that punch, that was dope. And he was like, dude, that's Gurren Lagann.
Oh, no way. I'm going to watch it again.
Yeah.
So I think you said season 2 and 3 of that. How did that all come about with Invincible? How did you get on the show? How did you start directing? Let's start there. Then I'll ask you some more questions. Sorry.
Yeah, no, all good. So, My Dad the Bounty Hunter was wrapping up at the when was that? I think that was like 2021, something like that. And I got a tip that Invincible was hiring, and that the supervising director for seasons 2 and 3 was Dan Duncan. And when I was working at again with the whole luck thing, when I was working at DreamWorks several years before this was maybe like 5 years before, Dan was a director for Marvel Animation. He worked on like the Guardians of the Galaxy show. He worked on the Spider-Man reboot at the time. And I freelanced for him. I heard about it from another buddy, one of my close friends. It was my first time storyboarding on a TV show. But because I had feature experience, he let me try, and I worked for him for like a full season. So I hit him up and I was like, hey, I heard you guys are hiring directors. And because he knew me from that show, it was, for him, it was like, he says it was like a no-brainer. And so he brought me on, but not only did he bring me on, he let me bring on my entire like team. He let me choose my storyboard artists. And so, yeah, that was how I got onto that.
Wow. I mean, this isn't luck. This is called networking, people. This is why they say it's not what you know, it's who you know. And this is why they always say, no matter what, just make sure you build your personal brand and don't burn bridges, and just, make sure that, wherever you leave, regardless of the circumstances, you leave amicably or in a good, because to your point, you never know when you're going to meet them again. And I find that regardless of how big this world is, it's very small, especially even the industries as well. So that's amazing. You clearly left a great impression on him. And for him to say it was a no-brainer, which is testament to your talent and your work ethic. So you bring your team on. Did the team have to like acclimatize in terms of, and I'm sure they're all great artists, but acclimatize to how season 1 looked, the feel? Or was it like Dan saying, you guys can come in, do your own thing, not necessarily completely like go off the different way in terms of how it looks, but maybe bring some new ideas and innovations?
Yeah. I mean, that was actually one of the big selling points for me, was that season 1 definitely had its own challenges. And I think putting together a new team, they wanted everybody to feel like we could kind of make our stamp, kind of like what I did on My Dad the Bounty Hunter. Like we could make our stamp creatively on what we felt could be added to the cinematic language of the Invincible world. Especially being a 2D show and kind of being more limited in terms of what we can do camera-wise and things like that. It was nice to know that it's like, well, I don't, I mean, outside of anime, which, and to be honest, is mostly more like action anime, my influences are primarily like film and like live action. With my team, it was like, well, can we do kind of like dramatic staging and kind of like dramatic scene building, kind of, Tarantino-esque, David Fincher-esque, Better Call Saul-esque, like filmmaking on a 2D show? And he was like, well, try it, and so we definitely had I mean, we had blinders, but they definitely encouraged us to try. And also my team specifically like was primarily like hadn't worked in like the adult space yet.
Okay.
So I think what I liked about it is that all of us had something to prove to ourselves. So
lots of blood.
Yeah, very fresh.
Yeah. Okay, so because it's funny you mentioned anime, because I was speaking to Antoine Tori. He worked on Arcane. And he mentioned that Arcane was actually inspired by Naruto. Not inspired the whole thing, but some elements within Arcane had like, because the guy who wrote Arcane, I think, I may be forgetting the specifics, but he went to Japan and he did some storyboarding there. They hired him. So he came back and he brought the influences from there, and he was a very big Naruto fan. So he tried to, kind of weave in some elements of Naruto into Arcane. Was there anything like that for your perspective in terms of like some animes that you wanted to potentially, not explicitly, but maybe like this maybe people who may not notice, but this is some anime kind of inspired sequence or move or scene kind of thing from your perspective?
On Invincible?
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. As much as far as I'm concerned, like the show tries to kind of delineate from anime and say that it's like, it's not that. It's like, well, I mean, everybody on the show are anime artists, so I don't know. But I, especially in the beginning, kind of getting my team on the same page creatively, we watched Paprika like pretty religiously. Yeah, I think also like Tokyo Godfathers.
Yeah.
I mainly, it's just anything Satoshi Kon, I think, is like, obviously it's outside of our reach, but it's a perfect blend of like how much cinema can be achieved in the 2D space. And then outside of that, Cowboy Bebop was like, was huge. I mean, the amount of like information and action and emotion that they pack, even in the show, into like, like
no,
20
that's fine.
into 20 minutes when we have a 45-minute show. I think that was sort of our, what's it called, like our training ground, because that's what I was shooting for. Outside of live action stuff, I was shooting for the like efficiency and the sophistication of something like Paprika, but also like the snappiness and just the general appeal of something like Cowboy Bebop. Because Cowboy Bebop is like, I heard on one I forget who you were talking to, but you mentioned that somebody said something like,
Cowboy Midbop.
Midbop?
Yeah, Sebi.
Dude, whoever that is needs to be, I don't want to say they need to be slapped.
That's
not
you,
by me.
Sebi.
Not by me. No. By the community.
I'm going to clip this and say, Sebi, that's you.
Oh, no.
No, we disagreed. We disagree with him heavily as well. But look, we don't gatekeep here. Anyone can have their own anime opinions. I've said some hellacious things that people have got me on, but hey, I stand 10 feet on it. 10 feet on it.
What?
Because it's all subjective in some sense. I think we did an episode on subjectivity versus objectivity. I think there's some things that are objectively great, and especially as someone like yourselves, who we're just like commoners, like, but you guys who are artists, animators, film directors, whatever, you can see the nuances regarding the show as to why it makes it great, where we're just looking, how many beans has it got? Was it a good punch kind of thing? Or the story, as it were.
No,
but I think there's definitely some things like are objectively, whether it be the timing, like Dragon Ball Z, people may, trash it for the story, but at the time and for what it did in the industry, what Toriyama did, rest in peace, was insane. Absolutely insane. You talk about Paprika, another great show. You look at all the things that Ghibli has done. Like, there are things that objectively, even if you don't like the show, something like Spirited Away, personally you may not like it, but objectively you cannot say it's a trash show. So that's why I think, for sure. I hear people screaming in my head saying, what is a director? What does a director do? Because I've interviewed some people, I may have not necessarily explicitly asked you. So just for people listening, what is your role as a director and how do you manage your team? Because from what I understand, I've learned is that you get a script, then you basically have to make that script into some storyboards, which then obviously get animated. Am I right in saying that?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah. I mean, did you want me to delineate just sort of what the
Yeah, yeah. If
tasks
you
are?
what I suppose maybe on Invincible, what were you doing there? Like, how were you managing the team specifically, or anything
Yeah.
just in response to your role at Invincible?
For directing on Invincible, you have to before you launch your story team on anything, you kind of we have to go over the tone of the episode with the creator, the creators of the show, the head writers, and some producers, and and just to make sure that we are delivering what they want. I get to ask all my questions there, and between the time of that meeting and the launch, I that is where I have to figure out, well, if there's anything that I want to do with this episode, anything creatively that I feel, any vision that I have on it, like not, quote unquote, I first have to go through the creators, and I kind of run that past them of like, well, what about these kind of cinematic ideas? What about rearranging these things? Can we change what parts of the script can be changed? And then when the boards are done, going through, I mean, I kind of have to sit. I storyboard as well, but at a much smaller capacity, since and I also sit in edit with my episodes. I work pretty closely with the editors in terms of timing. If things need to be rewritten, I pitch like music when I can, depending on if we already have the rights to certain things, or just suggesting like score and things like that. And in edit is where I also get to sort of like, that's after the tone meeting, I have that vision sort of like quest. And then in edit is also the other part where you kind of get to put your stamp on how it's timed, which I think that's probably my favorite part of directing, is kind of letting everything be free and treating it as like, all right, I'm going to create a cutting room floor out of all these ideas that I have. But again, all of that goes through the supervising director, the head of story, and yeah. So,
how long does a typical episode take from start to finish?
On Invincible, it's about like 3 to 4 months.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Long time. I like people to hear this, because you see that final outcome, you just think it's just drawings and it's done very quickly. And I know I keep saying this on the show, but it's the iceberg effect. You just see what tip of the iceberg is. You don't see the mass beneath the waters that takes to build that iceberg, or takes to do that work. So yeah, I'm glad you said that, because it's not just a quick, hey, let's do a show, because it does take a long time. What were some of your highlights, and what are some of your lowlights, whether it be on Invincible or whether it be on any other thing? Or let's start with Invincible, actually. What were some highlights and what were some challenges?
Honestly, the highlight of Invincible, I think, was like just developing the creative relationship with my team. Not in like a corny way, but I think that because it was really hard in the beginning. Like, we all kind of had our own creative challenges and certain things that we wanted to work on. They even let me know, it's like, well, on other shows, I've never gotten to do these types of scenes, or I've always wanted to be better at these types of things. So it was a bumpy road for like maybe an episode and a half of us working together and getting that kind of into like a well-oiled situation was like super, super satisfying. Because with that came the confidence for us to try to flex things and be more outspoken about kind of creative ideas we wanted in the show. I mean, it's interesting. Like, I want to talk about it, and I want to be more forthright about certain things. And at the same time, Invincible as a property is like very tight-lipped. So I don't want to accidentally,
No, that's fine. That's absolutely fine.
Yeah. But I mean, I will say, like, when you ask about Easter eggs or like anime reference, did you watch the second season of Invincible?
Yeah.
So 207, the episode where Anissa shows up and Mark like fights her on the beach.
Yep.
One of my board artists, Warren, he boarded that fight scene, and I was like, oh, that fight was sick. Like that punch, that was dope. And he was like, dude, that's Gurren Lagann.
Oh, no way! I'm gonna watch it again.
Yeah. So
I
I
did
was,
not notice.
I mean, I would have sworn because I was like, oh, like I was like, is that Mob Psycho? Like, what is that?
Yeah,
He was
yeah,
like,
yeah,
he
yeah.
was like, nah, he was like, that was that he pulled inspiration from Gurren Lagann on that. So
Amazing. I love hearing stuff like this just because art is there's a great book, and I've mentioned this before as well. There's a great book by Austin Kleon saying great art is still. And everything is remixed in this world, right? Just obviously done in a different way. And I just love that we all take inspiration to make different and great things. So, and the fact that, Gurren Lagann, which is one of my favorite animes ever, especially as a single season anime, to hear that was in Invincible has just made my day, man. Or an element of that was Invincible has made my day. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I guess speaking of fights, are those the hardest scenes to like do? Or are there like, what's the misconception? Am I right in saying that, fight scenes are the hardest, or is there actually other scenes that are much harder to do?
My opinion is that, well, it's just a drop in the bucket of everyone's opinion. I think that I know that my opinion would be different. I think from a production standpoint, action scenes they require more drawings. Personally, I think that every scene is equally challenging if you're like doing it well. Every now and then you can get lucky and certain scenes can be like low ask, but I like to be as character based as possible in storytelling, like no matter the type of scene. I mean, I think that's why, like personally, I think that's why, like in Naruto, like the Naruto Sasuke fight is like, it's so, the build up to that and what happens in that fight is so character specific. That is why it's so captivating. I think the short answer is that like fight scenes are the most physically demanding, but they're not like the hardest in my opinion.
Okay. Anime. I know we've been kind of like sprinkling it in there and there, and I'm glad, like, because that was going to be one of our Discord questions, and like, do you like anime and what's your favorite anime? And I'm sure people like to the anime. But yeah, so anime. What are you currently watching now? And then what is your top 3 anime?
Top 3. Right now, I'm finishing Dan to Dan.
Love it.
And I also recently started watching Hajime no Ippo because I heard that one, like the boxing anime.
That's it's in my top 3.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Hajime no Ippo is like quickly my top 3: Hajime no Ippo, Ghost in the Shell, and One Piece.
Ooh, okay,
Yeah.
wow,
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think my top 3. Wow, that's tough. I mean, that's tough because there's like shows and movies.
Yeah. True. You know what? Just top 3 at the moment, because I like to say at the moment because sometimes it can change and so on and so forth. So top 3 at the moment, or top 3 that comes to mind.
Top 3 at the moment would be
top 5.
Okay, top 5 would be, off the top of my head, would be Paprika, Cowboy Bebop, like I mentioned, Lacrosse Plus.
I've never heard of that one. Lacrosse Plus.
Macross with an M. You should check it out. It's crazy, dude.
Okay.
Crazy. I mean, we'll see how the season ends, but right now I'm really enjoying Dan to Dan, I would say. And Evangelion.
Attack on Titan? Oh, Evangelion. Yeah, Evangelion is crazy. Yeah. Absolute mind.
Yeah. You can bleep that.
Exactly. Exactly. What did you think of, have you seen all of Dan to Dan yet, or are you still going through it?
No, I'm on episode 4.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, but out of 8, right?
Yeah. So it's not much. There's I don't know if you've heard, but there's something that happens in episode 7 which the whole industry was going crazy about.
Yes, I mean, I heard that 7 was like a masterpiece, but then I also heard that the finale is like people were pissed.
Oh really? I haven't got to that place yet.
Just in terms of where it leaves off.
Yeah. I think it's hard to satisfy anime fans.
I mean, we don't even know what we are. So
exactly, it's very hard. We're very it's not good. Like Attack on Titan, people loved it, people hated it. I think personally it's the anime of the decade. Like in the last 10
Oh
years,
yeah,
I haven't
yeah, yeah,
seen
yeah.
a better anime. Like One Piece is my number one, like echelon, like nothing moves it. But if we're taking bits of time, Attack on Titan in the last 10 years, incredible story, incredible
Yeah.
anime for sure.
I need to commit to finishing that. It's for sure.
Yeah, it was on
Yeah,
and off a lot. It
yeah.
was on and off. Like I said, we have some Discord questions, so we'll go through those quickly if that's okay.
Cool.
Do you have any similar characteristics of any of the characters in Invincible? Or do you think you have any similar characteristics?
Similar characteristics. I think maybe it'll make more sense as the show goes on, but I see a lot of myself in Rex.
Okay, yeah.
Even though he's like comic relief, he's just like, I mean, he says the quiet part out loud, you know. And there's a lot
funny.
there's a lot of that energy with me. As much as I want to pretend like I'm Mark, like that's people saying that they're Gryffindor. It's like most of you are not, you know. Most of you are not Gryffindor. So yeah, probably I relate to Rex a lot, I would say.
Nice. And would you say he's your favorite Invincible character as well?
No. I particularly enjoy like Cecil, actually. I think
Okay, yeah.
I think Cecil is you know, man. Well, anyway. Yeah, he's the most nuanced, and also the actor that portrays him, I think, just does a really good job. So
yeah, there's some amazing voice actors on that show. Amazing.
yeah.
What is more important, sorry, for an adaptation of a comic? Accuracy of source material or the ability to take creative liberty?
Whoa. That's it. I mean, see, it's interesting because it's like that's a fan question, but it's also like only fans should be answering that question, right?
Oh, okay.
I mean, because like, say for example, you put that in the hands of the creator, it's subjective what a good job is, and I think that even working on stuff at Marvel and whatnot, it's like that's always our question. Because I mean, let me throw a question out to you real quick. Just real quick, we can get back to this. But when you hear the term fan service,
Yes.
is that a good thing or a bad thing?
You know what? It depends. I know it's funny because if people don't know, fan service in the anime community is when there is how do I explain it? There's an over sensationalism of body parts, whether it be male or female characters, to appease fans. Now we've spoken about this on the show that as a 14-year-old boy, shonen is basically for like preteen or teenage boys, right? Primarily, not to say that only boys can watch shonen, everyone can watch it, but that's kind of like the target audience. So me and my co-host, we also used to joke like teenage boys, we're just like, oh my gosh, like, oh wow, you know, fan service. So they're drawn to it. Now, I personally think the old school fan service, like the ones in Dragon Ball Z, so on and so forth, where it provides comic relief is fine. And probably overcomplicating this answer, but where there's some sort of comic relief is fine. Whereas what I don't like is an unneeded kind of like just so she falls down and you see her panties, or she leans over and there's just big breasts, and like sometimes there's no need for it. I just think they just put it in there. Now it's not for me to say they should take it out. It's not my culture. It's not me drawing it. So on and so forth. You know, everyone has their own opinion, but I think in some instances it goes over the top. And I don't know if you've ever seen Seven Deadly Sins. There's a scene where Meliodas is just fondling, I forgot her name now, but she's just fondling her breast. I don't know why. There's no need for it, right? Whereas when it comes to like Naruto, where Jiraiya Sensei is trying to get a peek and he never gets it, it's almost like a cat and mouse. So there's a bit of comic relief there. That for me is kind of like funny, but then the other ones are just like no. So sorry, I know I'm kind of overcomplicated answer when you say what comes to mind. And I don't want to say it's a bad thing, but I also don't want to say it's a good thing. It just depends on how it's done.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so there. Yeah, I mean, I from that perspective, I think that creatively, And even when it comes to lore, in this case of like adapting a comic, a lot of times we, you know, I'd say half the time we're kind of like servicing the comic through gritted teeth, and the other half we're like very, very thankful that it's there because it does a lot of the work for you. So I think even if you're adapting a comic, at the end of the day, we are still like our own creative vessel in a way.
Yeah.
You can't, you have to leave some room for you. So obviously it's like, it's a matter of homage or respect that you're trying to adapt things as closely as possible. But even something like Invincible, as far as the first 2 seasons go, just what you've seen, characters have been swapped out or gender bent. Issues have been, and storylines have been told out of order, in order to kind of like craft this adaptation. And so I feel like the, instead of saying one is more important than the other, balance is key.
No, that's a great answer. I hear that. I know that sometimes, and like there's a manga called Promised Neverland, and I believe season 2 completely went off script, and there was a lot of people who didn't necessarily like that. But I think, to your point, there has to be balance. You don't want to go too away from the source material, but then you also want to be too rigid where I think there are 2 different mediums, a book and TV or film or whatever, you know, so you're going to have to tell the story the best way. I know the same thing with the Lord of the Rings or, you know, Game of Thrones. Like, maybe if you've read the book and it doesn't necessarily, you know, go in the order that you wanted it to, you may have those like few people like, rah, 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 rah. But in general, when you're trying to like showcase a good story to the masses, people who mostly haven't probably read the books, that's kind of the aim, and I think that should be the goal, to tell a great story. I think that's what it is.
Yeah,
so I think,
and I would say for anyone that's doing that, either for an exercise or for something more serious for themselves, comics or reading books, and I think even Cortland was talking about this in his talk with you.
Yeah.
Comics, and this is where the individual experience is important and can be championed. When you're reading something, you're reading it and kind of like imbuing it with your own like pace and your own tone. Even though it seems objective on the page, the emotional experience of reading is subjective to every person. So if you're adapting comics into this animation or film medium, I think like tone and pacing is more important than staying true to exactly what's there, because the comic made you feel something. You read a book, it made you feel something. How do you transfer that feeling if you're going to adapt it into something animated? Because if you have to change it, but it makes you feel what you felt when you read it, then that is more important than doing it exactly the way that you saw it.
Perfectly said. I like that. And speaking of, actually, in terms of animation, do you think animation as a medium is more powerful than live action? I know this is probably a hard question. Like, what? They're probably 2 different things, but I'm just getting your perspective.
No,
I'll say for me, I think whilst I love live action and there's great stories, people have amazing abilities and so on and so forth. For me, animation is just it's just pure bliss and joy in terms of escapism, creativity, all meshed into like a picture where, you know, the artist you can see has complete reign and freedom. But anyway, what do you think in terms of animation as a medium? Is it more powerful than live action, or maybe just different?
Oh boy, dude. bro, I think about this all the time.
Really? Okay.
I think about this all the time, and I'll have different answers every day. And generally it's the same. It's just different versions, which is that I do believe animation is more powerful. As much as we're trying to bring live action and all those concepts into it, the reason today why I think that animation is more powerful is because it is the ultimate underdog story. As much as like frontiers will always be, there will always be new frontiers in any kind of medium, film or animation alike. Animation is still kind of relegated to kids media. Even though we have Spider-Verse, even though we did Blue-Eyed Samurai and all those things, in all this adult content, that the creation of that content runs parallel with us being fully aware that adult animation is still like a new concept. So for something like adult animation, for instance, to be a brand new concept outside of kids animation, that's only like 2 factions. So where animation can go and what we can do in terms of what audiences we can reach and sort of breaking outside of a niche, because animation still is kind of niche. To me, that means that the potential of animation is, and technology and all that, and storytelling compared to film, which is much older, is like still surprisingly untapped. So the potential of animation, like we don't know what that is. And if we just look at some stupid metric like box office numbers, for example, at the end of the day, live action can't like compete with like what animation can do. Just in terms of like what the top 5 grossing movies were last year, I think 3 of them were animated. So I think, but again, it's like Godfather 1 and Godfather 2.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have the sophistication and so on. And I mean, you wouldn't have, I mean, this is my humble opinion, but you wouldn't have Spider-Verse 1 and what they did on a visually groundbreaking level without its understanding and reverence to live action filmmaking. That is like, that is the other part of it that I think I've noticed as a trend over the last, I would say like 10 years, is animation in general really becoming more cinematic, becoming more mature in how it's made. Same with like video games and video game cinematics. So live action is definitely like the sort of the godfather of all that. But yeah, animation is something else, dude.
Nah, I hear that. You're speaking to my soul there. And I like that you made the distinction between adult and children or kids, because I mean, I love even now when I say watch anime to some of my cousins and some of my friends, they think it's either hentai or they think it's
ultimate fan service.
Exactly. UFC, UFS, sorry, UFS. Ultimate fan service. Oh gosh. But yeah, they either think it's that or they think it's just silly cartoons. Like, I'm tired of explaining it's not. Like, anime is just powerful storytelling just shown through animation. And yeah, it's deep. Like,
yeah.
I try and get, like I said, I try and get people into it, but they just feel like because they're watching cartoons, they're quote unquote kids again, or they want to seem like they're older and they're not kiddie. But it's completely different. And I think that's why shows like Invincible, Blue-Eyed Samurai, which you mentioned, which was also stupendous. Oh my gosh. Again, kudos to you and the team for doing that. Those are stories and just animation that are speaking to a lot of adults and people who are into animation, but are coming through into animation through those kind of stories or through those kind of shows, because it's to say, look, there is something for adults as well. It's not just your kiddie ABC or so on and so forth. These are deep stories just told through animation. So no, I really like that distinction there. Where do you see the future of animation going? This is our last Discord question regarding where do you see the future of animation in the West? We saw Arcane spend over 200 million on their 9-episode show. Worth every penny, worth every buck, in my opinion. What a show that was. Do you think this will become the norm, or can great storytelling overcome poor, lackluster production?
Whoa. Wow. It's a great question. So many ways to answer that question. Well, I mean, I think that this is like, put your tinfoil hat on for my conspiracies here. But I think the major studio system has kind of been, for its own reasons, has been kind of flawed for a long time. just in terms of how they produce things, how expensive things are.
Mm-hmm.
And my assumption was that, like, I don't know, 10 to even like 5 years from now, smaller boutique studios and people breaking out and doing their own thing will become the norm, and that makes way for like AI as well. Like it's a sad and kind of scary reality in a way, but because they mention production and they mention numbers, I wouldn't normally answer it this kind of like granular, but animation, I don't know how, but I predict that animation is going to become significantly cheaper in the next decade, which will mean that we will have to, as artists, we'll have to figure out how to navigate that, and or take control of it ourselves. And these boutique studios are, I forget what Wes said, but like, him with Lion Animation and or even in France, so with like Studio La Cachette, or I feel like,
or Fortiche as well.
Fortiche, I feel like we're gonna see a rise in that. But yeah, because I mean, they're asking from a production standpoint, not from like a storytelling standpoint, right?
So the last bit of it was, do you think this will become a norm, or can great story overcome poor lackluster production? So let's just take Arcane. Great story, great production, like top tier, amazing. However, from my perspective anyway, I think you can have a budget, even to a point where you can have stickmen on the, like, I don't know if you saw those old YouTube videos where it's like a stickman fighting. But the story was there, so people still kind of like loved it, and you like navigated to it. So I think production, to an element, is like the icing on the cake, but the story is the foundation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's where, just from a production standpoint, that's where we kind of have like a chicken egg situation, because just because you have the right story in terms of getting it made, like, that requires money. But then on the flip side, you have a lot of money, that doesn't always mean you can tell a good story. So
good story, yeah.
I think, I mean, trends aside, it's like, and I think that's why we all still have our jobs, and that's why it's so hard. Like, kind of like writing a good story, it's like lightning in a bottle. Nobody knows how to do that over and over again. The short answer is, like, stories always matter more. People are going to come back because of the story. Maybe people will be entertained because of the animation, but people are going to stick around for the story.
I agree. I'm watching Mob Psycho at the moment. I was and Ranking of Kings. I don't know if you like Ranking the Kings. My co-host kept saying, you gotta watch this, you gotta watch this. I'm like, it looks like a little children's fairy tale, the like line drawing. It just looks, I'm not watching this. He said, watch this show. Okay, I watched it, and oh my, one of the best shows I've ever watched. It's in my top 10 anime of all time. Like,
wow.
And the only reason why it's not high is because it's only had one season. I want to see how it kind of like, but you have like, they flip everything anime, the classic shonen trope, they flipped that. They made it with like this. It's just incredible. And the art style wasn't something I was like familiar with. So similar to Kengan Ashura as well. That not necessarily that had a great story, but again, enough, because I love martial arts. I was a martial artist. Enough for me to like still be watching it. So I think you're absolutely right. Like shows like Mob Psycho, Ranking the Kings, the production may not necessarily be there, and I'm just speaking as an amateur, it probably is there, but it may not be there from what we see, but the story is more than makes up for it. For sure. Last question here is, what is your general preference, 2D or 3D? Do you have one?
Not anymore. No. Okay. I think that before going into series and working on 2D shows, my preference was like feature, because I just felt like 2D was really limiting. But I think regardless of the medium, like limitations are actually kind of like your best friend in a way. It's kind of like with cooking, where they say that, you can make all the fanciest things, but it's really how you like cooking eggs is like really hard, for instance. Cooking eggs like really, really well, for instance. And so I feel like that's something that I've kind of grown into in my career at this point is like restraint and limitation. That was the challenge of for me to be hopping back to like Spider-Verse from Invincible was like I went from from a snare drum to like a 50-piece kit. Like, how do I maintain musicality with all of these bells and whistles? So yeah, I think that I don't have a preference because it's all about like simplicity and limitation at the end of the day.
And this might be the hardest question you're ever going to answer.
Oh,
and
wow.
This is from me. This is going to be the hardest question. It's been hotly debated. And I have to answer. I have to ask. Sorry, as a storyboard artist, a person who loves anime, animator, a director, is Avatar: Last Airbender an anime? In your opinion? It's raging in the anime community. People say it's an anime. People say it's not an anime. Where do you stand aside the fence?
Wow. I mean, unfortunately, I feel like it's not that hard for me because I'm not like super versed in the Avatar world. I've only watched one season.
Okay.
I mean, I relate to it as like Western anime. It's like something. It's it's something in the middle. I don't know what like the major argument is against it, but like I don't know how people couldn't consider that an anime. It is.
I think it's an anime. I mean, in Japan, they say anime is cartoon. So Shrek is an anime. Toy Story is an anime.
Sure.
In the style of, I think, and for me, anyway, I know I had an argument like Boondocks or Avatar, which one looks more like anime. But for me, Avatar kind of has anime characteristics. It doesn't look like a Dexter's Laboratory or like a Tom and Jerry or something like that, which you can clearly see is Western.
Yeah.
But I've also learned in my interviews and so on and so forth that anime actually derived from Western cartoons.
Yeah.
Someone from Japan actually copied some Western cartoon, and that's how the big eyes and so on and so forth. I think it was Astro Boy. He apparently copied someone. I can't remember the specifics, but
that's funny.
That's what I say. Everything's remixed, right? So
yeah.
I don't know why the anime community are so precious about what is and what isn't anime.
Is there one primary argument as to why it doesn't classify
as an anime?
Yeah. Is there
because people feel like it can only be anime if it comes out of Japan.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, okay, then sure. I mean, that's why it was like Western anime. Like that's why I thought.
Yeah. But then that's like saying that's Chinese hip hop or African ballet. I don't know, but you know what I mean? It's like hip hop is hip hop, right? So whether it's from New York or whether it's from London.
No, I'm just kidding.
He's from LA, so he's like, whoa.
Yeah.
But just like hip hop for me anyway. Like obviously there'll be different twangs, different like different styles. But if you're trying to capture the element, like sushi, right? Some sushi be made better at other places, but if it's trying to capture the technique and how sushi is made, I'm not gonna say, I had a Belgian sushi today. Like I just had sushi, Yeah. That's my opinion anyways. But it's a silly argument, but
yeah. Well, I mean, sorry to not make that one more of a headline.
No, it's fine. I'll just be in tongue in cheek there. So as we come to the end, Ian, is there anything else that we should be aware of?
Yeah. Next month, top of February, season 3 of Invincible is coming out, and catch that on Amazon Prime.
Great. I'm sure I would love to know what any spoilers, but I know Ian is probably under NDA, so everyone just plug in when it comes out, and I'm sure it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, totally. Cowboy Bebop is Cowboy Mid-Bop.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Sebi Summer. Thanks very much. We appreciate it. He will not be back. So, yeah, it was good. Hey, take us out. Let's go.